the Earth, the most generous and extraordinary of all the planets. For centuries, human beings have used natural resources for our own benefit. Nature, in all its splendor, has allowed us to survive and prosper as a species. Our growth, however, has affected the Earth so much that at the end of the last century, signs of exhaustion were beginning to appear. The old conservation guidelines became obsolete. New solutions had to be found, more global and ambitious ones, if we wanted to preserve a nature that would assure the future of all species, including our own. And the most developed countries had to find them. Willing to implement real solutions, a new generation of zoos and their associated conservationist foundations have joined forces with a common aim: to save the most endangered species and ecosystems of the Earth. And to achieve this, they have become the heirs to the legendary biblical ark. Ten years ago, José Maldonado began to devise an ambitious project. Concerned with conserving animals and their ecosystems, Maldonado began to work on setting up a new park, a place where some of the most endangered species could be preserved, which at the same time would educate people and make them aware of this need. The park would be the latest example of zoo immersion, a new form of understanding zoological parks. Here, ecosystems would be recreated with painstaking precision. The animals would be placed in different enclosures, separated only by natural barriers, and different species would share the same ecosystem, just as they do in the wild. It was the start of what would end up becoming the best zoo in Europe. And during its long construction process, Maldonado was going to learn firsthand about the main problems and solutions of global conservation in this young 21st century. The destruction of ecosystems at a global level is not a new process. Throughout its history, our planet has suffered mass extinctions in which up to 98% of the species that inhabited the Earth have disappeared. Today, species are becoming extinct at a rate between 100 and 10,000 times faster than the speed at which new species are being created. Scientists suspect that if we don't find a solution, before the end of the century, more than half of the species living on Earth today will have become extinct. Because the latest mass extinction is taking place now at a speed 1,000 times faster than the one generated by the meteorites. And we human beings are the cause behind it. If there is an undeniable reality, then we have to admit that the Earth's most important ecological problem is the excessive human population. Today, more than 6 billion people inhabit the Earth, and we continue to proliferate exponentially. If we continue to grow at this rate, there will be 9 billion humans feeding on and exploiting the natural resources of a planet that is more and more exhausted, without accepting the fact that the Earth also has its limits. Our impact has reached such levels that we are even changing the planet's climate. Now we are not dealing with small local problems that can be solved quickly and efficiently, but with global problems that affect the entire Earth and all its species. Conservationists, who focused on protecting specific species a century ago, are now struggling to preserve entire ecosystems. To do so, they have to combine fieldwork, which they call in situ preservation, with other actions that may take place thousands of kilometers away from the origin of the problem, where economic, technical, and scientific resources make it possible. These are the places where the so-called ex situ preservation takes place. And most of these ex situ activities are carried out in new generation zoos. On what was once a barren field, José Maldonado has begun the construction of his ambitious idea. Biopark, a zoo immersion park able to contribute to preserving the most endangered ecosystems in the world. During the first phase, the park will focus on Africa, the continent that exemplifies the most pressing problems and solutions of nature in this century. Three years of hard work still lie ahead, in which the team of specialists will work tirelessly to make these barren lands into a replica of the heart of Africa. The new zoo immersion parks recreate the reality of the original ecosystems so carefully that there are not only engineers and bricklayers working at the site, but also sculptors, artists, and international experts in charge of giving shape to the rocks, trees, and tree trunks. Maldonado and his team are facing an extraordinary challenge. In just 3 years, they will reproduce the savanna, the Tsingy of Madagascar, and the Central African equatorial forests, a representative sample of Africa's most important and endangered biodiversity hotspots. In view of the alarming loss of species and ecosystems that is taking place, scientists from around the world defend the preservation of what they have called biodiversity hotspots. Biodiversity is not uniformly distributed throughout the planet, but is centered on a relatively low number of habitats of unique ecological importance. These hotspots are places where a very high variety of generally endemic species live. The 25 spots chosen by scientists as the most important occupy only 1.4% of the total surface area of the planet, but they are home to 44% of its plant species and 35% of its mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians. The African jungle is one of them. Almost half of the world's tropical forests have disappeared over the last few centuries. Despite the fact that they cover barely 6% of the Earth's total surface area, they are home to more than half the species known to science. And the largest of them all is found here, in the Congo River Basin. No other jungle on Earth has such large mammals. And no other jungle has such large populations of them. And that's not the only thing that makes the Congo River Basin unique. It's the only place in the world where you can find the 5 great primates, 2 species of gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, and us, human beings. All the great simians of Africa are found in the Central African jungles. Almost 4 million square kilometers make the Congo River Basin the planet's second largest lung, a hope for a world that is becoming more polluted every day. Since the end of the 70s, however, the tropical forests of the Congo are the ones losing the most acreage per year. The lumber industries have centered their activities on the west side of the Congo River Basin. The new guidelines for lumber companies regulate the felling of trees, thus making this a sustainable activity. Some of the governments in the area, however, are not as strict as they should be, and unscrupulous companies continue to fell large areas of virgin forest without any control whatsoever. And as the trees disappear, so do the chances of survival for some of the most endangered species on Earth, and the local people who live in and for the forest. The deforestation of the Congo River Basin is reflected in the largest and most unique African island, Madagascar, the fourth largest island in the world, and the first in terms of the number of endemic species. Of the 200,000 species that inhabit the island, 150,000 are exclusive to the island. This makes it one of the most important biodiversity hotspots in the world. But it is a hotspot threatened with death. For many scientists, Madagascar has become the highest priority for the conservation of the Earth's biodiversity, because it is at the top of the list in the number of endemic species, as well as in the rate of deforestation. Since the arrival of man on the island, almost 2,000 years ago, close to 90% of its original forest has disappeared. As a consequence, whole ecosystems have become extinct, and with them, dozens of unique and extraordinary animals. And we are talking about a country where most of the human population lives in rural communities that depend on the land and the forest for their survival. Millions of people who, without the forest, would be left without the necessary resources to survive. In an apparent contradiction to the fertility of the equatorial forests, East Africa is the owner of the Great Plains. This is the place where the wildlife puts on the greatest shows, the large concentrations of herbivores on the vast African savannas. It is the destination for the largest migration of hoofed animals on the continent. And the domain of the great hunters. The ease with which wildlife is observed here has turned East Africa into the paradigm of ecological tourism, proving that nature can be the economic engine of a country. Problems have also begun to arise here, however. If tourism is not properly controlled, it can turn into an additional problem for the already deteriorated environment. The ecological pressure exerted by tourists has reached such an extreme that in the parks of vital ecological importance, some of the animals, especially the predators, are changing their habits to avoid being harassed by the vehicles that give away their position as they stalk their prey. Others don't have the chance to adapt and disappear. Now scientists and conservation foundations are trying to find new solutions to make nature and tourism compatible. But there is very little time left. Maldonado's right-hand man, Gonzalo Fernandez, completes the design details for the park in Valencia. The design aims to transport visitors to the biodiversity hotspots on the African continent. But more importantly, it is a design that allows the animals living there to feel at home so they reproduce. Animals that Gonzalo himself will be responsible for choosing and bringing in.
A la hora de elegir las especies, hombre, tenemos muy en cuenta.
When it comes to choosing the species, we really keep in mind how a species may potentially appeal to the public, because this really allows us to convey a message of conservation.
Y buscamos a especies.
We're looking for species that are in danger of extinction, that are in the European reproduction programs for the species. We can get those species through these programs, but at the same time, we have to surround them with other species.
Choosing the species that will make up the Biopark collection is a hard and complex task. They must be animals from the savanna, Madagascar, or Africa's equatorial forests, most of which are in danger of extinction, and whose international recovery programs depend to a large extent on the joint efforts of zoos and parks around the world. But in addition to breeding the species in danger of extinction, we have to assure their future. The new generation of zoos will serve as educational centers. It's an extremely important mission for conservation in the 21st century, but not the only one that these new parks are carrying out. The Bronx Zoo in New York is probably the best zoo in the world. During its long history, which dates back to 1899, the Bronx Zoo, now renamed the Wildlife Conservation Park, has not only educated and helped people to understand and love the nature on display, but has also supported the world's largest non-governmental conservation foundation, the Wildlife Conservation Society.
People don't realize, especially that zoos like the Bronx Zoo and the Wildlife Conservation Society, we do a lot more than care for collections of animals. Okay, we try to protect and have succeeded in protecting vast tracts of natural areas for animals in the wild to live and prosper in. And people support those efforts just by coming to the zoo and our other facilities.
Part of the profits from these new parks finance their foundation's work, which allows scientists to put into practice the knowledge acquired from studying the animals in captivity.
One of the big things that's changing in zoos, in modern zoos and zoos of the future, is I think this trend to continue to link zoo exhibits to conservation efforts in the wild is going to continue. People need to realize that zoo professionals, people who work with and care for the animals, are providing valuable knowledge and information to scientists who are working on conservation efforts in the field. And we have vast collections, we have vast medical records that people who study animals in the wild and study ecosystems and how these animals relate to each other, to other species, to their habitat, they might not have all that information. There's a wealth of information at zoos that can benefit these conservation efforts. And that's a trend that I think you're going to see continue to develop.
The most economically developed countries have the enormous responsibility of conserving the natural paradises left on Earth, while at the same time offering a future to those who inhabit them. It is an ethical question that arises from the knowledge and understanding of our own history. Europe, just 5 centuries ago. Great forests ran from north to south on the old continent. The night reveals a world without lights. Only in the south do powerful volcanoes illuminate the coast of Italy. With a new sunrise, we skip 5 centuries ahead. The color of Europe has changed. The forests have disappeared as our societies have progressed and expanded. The night finds us in the present day. 21st century Europe is outlined by the lights of millions of cities and towns. Italy's volcanoes are now just one light among thousands of others. This is the symbol of a progress achieved at the cost of a natural heritage that has been almost completely used up. South of Europe, an even older continent recalls the place where we emerged as a species. Large, expanding deserts threaten from the north. But the green belt of the impenetrable forest resists the advance of such vast destruction. Here in Africa, the night has barely changed in 1,000 centuries. Nevertheless, the destruction of its natural environment now seems similar to what took place in Europe. The island of Madagascar has suffered brutal deforestation over the last century. 90% of its original forests have disappeared. But when night falls, we discover something surprising. Darkness. Poverty. Today, third world countries argue that they have the right to exploit their natural resources to reach a level of development equivalent to the first world. But this would give rise to the destruction of the last refuges of an increasingly scarce natural world.
But what we have to do is address the problems that people in these countries around the world are facing. And we have to work together with local people, with local governments, and try to figure out a way that people in countries can use their country's natural resources for the benefit of the people who live there, for the benefit of the animals who live there, and at the same time protect the area that these animals need to live. And I think it can be done.
The solution to this dilemma lies in figuring out how to preserve the natural heritage of the world's poorest countries in ways that will produce economic benefits that will allow them to develop. And to achieve this, the first world should contribute the resources. Koen Brouwer has recently arrived from his native country of the Netherlands to manage Biopark. Until then, Koen had managed the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums, an association responsible for ensuring the proper scientific, ecological, and ethical management of Europe's zoos. Biopark is a new challenge for Koen, especially because in Spain, the word zoo still conjures up the image of a jail for animals, quite the opposite of the care and preservation of species. Therefore, besides the difficulties of managing a new park, he must also tackle the tough but engaging task of educating the public, starting with teaching them how the world's zoos have evolved since the appearance of the first collections of animals. The history of zoos dates back to the oldest urban civilizations, around 5,000 years ago. Initially, the collections of animals were a symbol of power, only within the reach of the most powerful classes and royalty. The first collections of animals appeared in Mesopotamia and Egypt, eventually becoming very sophisticated collections. Likewise, in the China of the emperors and in the great pre-Columbian cultures, the dominant classes exhibited animals brought from beyond their borders. Throughout history, these first zoos were a reflection of power. Those who had collections of animals include Charlemagne, to whom the Caliph of Baghdad sent 2 elephants, William the Conqueror, Louis IX of France, who brought an elephant back from the Crusades, Popes Benedictine XII and Leo X, and Philip IV of France, who created an area in the Louvre Castle for lions and leopards. During the 15th and 16th centuries, the growth of the collections in Europe was similar to the expansion of Europe's exploration of the world and the discovery of America. They brought back animals from Africa and Asia, and others also arrived, completely new animals which came from the New World. In the 18th and 19th centuries, zoos became very popular and gradually changed from being private collections to public ones. It was the beginning of an even more important change. As the mere collections of animals that were exhibited for the public's enjoyment gave way to zoos created for scientific research, education, and finally, active conservation. Lastly, a new idea began to develop, which was revolutionary on account of its ambitious aims. If we wanted to save the endangered species, we had to faithfully recreate the habitats where they lived. Visitors could enter these exact reproductions of the natural habitats and experience what it would be like to come face to face with nature. This would be the most direct way for people to appreciate and value nature. Or in other words, for people to show concern for it and start to fight to conserve it. The result is called zoo immersion. The construction at Biopark has advanced a lot after 3 years of hard work. The different ecosystems are clearly beginning to stand out from one another. And little by little, what was once a barren field is turning into a corner of Africa. Zoo immersion enables animals and visitors to experience the same sensations as in the original ecosystems being reproduced. So they look for different species to share enclosures. For predators and prey to be together. And between animals and people, only natural or almost invisible boundaries to separate them. This means controlling such unique details as, how high can a lion jump? What should a flooded moat be like to prevent a group of elephants from running away? How thick must a pane of glass be to withstand a gorilla's fist? And naturally, these are details that it would be best to have under complete control. The first animals will be arriving at Biopark shortly. For José Maldonado, it is time to activate the Instituto del Trópico, the foundation created along with the zoo to protect and conserve the tropical forests. Ready to gather information firsthand, which would allow the foundation to take action wherever it was deemed most necessary, Maldonado decided to shine the spotlight on Africa's main ecological problems in a documentary series. He met with the film crew, and together they planned the trip. The crew would witness the situation firsthand and could contribute up-to-date information about the ecological problems of Africa. Of course, none of the individuals at that meeting could ever have imagined what an adventure it would be to gather this information. The labyrinths of the Tsingy of Madagascar, the vast plains of East Africa, the impenetrable forests of Uganda, and especially the interior of the jungles of the Congo River Basin, were all going to be stages for hundreds of adventures which would place the film crew on the front line in the battle for conservation. Looking at conservation in the 21st century means looking at the local communities of the affected areas. The biodiversity hotspots are often hard-to-reach places, and only the local people can penetrate this world that is off-limits to man. And in the most difficult of them all, in the jungles of the Congo, no one is a better guide than a Bayaka pygmy. One of the main guidelines of the new conservation movement advocates that the nature that we want to protect should be profitable for the local communities. For the pygmies, the conservation activities of certain foundations, like the Wildlife Conservation Society or the World Wildlife Fund, have become a way of prospering without having to give up their traditional way of life. For the film crew, the help they received from these guides became indispensable. Even more so when they wanted to film potentially dangerous animals. But of course, for the film crew, the most dangerous animals were not necessarily the largest. The pygmies, who guide scientists and visitors, are learning that many of the animals they once hunted illegally now provide them with money when people come to see them. And although it's not exactly because of ecological principles, they are not hunting them and are becoming their greatest defenders. The local inhabitants were of extraordinary help to the film crew, and not only as guides. Their vision of the situation in each area allowed us to see the other side of many ecological problems. This is the Kibale Forest in Uganda. Protected as a national park, Kibale has the largest population of chimpanzees in the world. Funds from various international foundations meet the expenses of the park, which centers on protecting these primates. And as a result, their preservation has been a success. On the other side of the protected area, however, things are seen differently. Chimpanzees are very intelligent social animals. Their diet is mainly vegetarian and is made up of fruits, leaves, roots, and berries. But when they need protein, they go out and hunt for it. And they hunt for monkeys. On occasion, during the time of year when fruit is scarce, the chimpanzees of Kibale can't find small animals to hunt because the people from the local communities poach them. In consequence, they make forays into the farmland surrounding the park, and if they find a child, they kidnap him and eat him.
So when the mom is concentrating on digging, then the chimp kidnaps the baby. Even that incident which normally happens, they normally hear the baby crying. Oh, see behind, they see the chimp with the baby running and baiting the baby. And he's crying. When they reported that case to Uganda Wildlife Authority, UWA never corresponded. And instead of hunting or to get that chimp or to facilitate the family, or to talk to them in a way how they must be handled, they just the chimp and to back to the park.
Together with the local communities, the film crew constantly needed the help of guards and rangers in order to be able to work with a degree of safety. The target species of this series were mostly species in danger of extinction. And in addition to the difficulty they had finding them, we had to add the excitement of some close encounters. It was the best way to approach these animals that would reproduce in the future at the new park in Valencia. At Biopark, the construction work is reaching completion, and now they are working on the final details. The first animals have begun to arrive from various European parks. Every new arrival arouses great expectation among the team of caretakers. Many of the animals that come to the park have never shared an enclosure with other species, and we have to watch how they behave. Some had never even had grass, brush, or trees within their reach. An appetizing temptation which, at first, is inevitably startling. And for others, it's even the first time that they've encountered the opposite sex. Something that intimidates everyone the first time. But even among the rhinoceros, after their initial insecurity, logically, they express their happiness. Ten years have passed since José Maldonado first envisioned the park. Now, shortly before it is to open to the public, he is working out the final details with the large team of professionals responsible for the different enclosures and species. It is time to begin the enormous task of education and awareness, starting with these urban ecosystems.
There are two fundamental premises for creating this zoo. First, education, meaning increasing the awareness of all those people who visit us, their awareness of these habitats and the need to conserve them. And second, the conservation of these species. But preserving nature is a fundamental requirement for their conservation. If we don't preserve nature, and we only preserve the habitats, it's impossible to think about saving individual species. This is the reason for creating the zoo.
And it is also time to begin the tasks of the foundation in distant lands, there where the species housed by the park need it most. It is a task that begins with making the people who come to the park aware of their plight.
We have eliminated the boundaries so that the spectators feel immersed. This is zoo immersion in the animals' habitats, and knowing, this word is essential, knowing about the different kinds of animals and how they live in the wild. When people know about them, they appreciate them. And this is the beginning of their learning process, and this will give them the opportunity to receive a true education.
Africa dies a little every day. Its legendary forests, its eternal savannas, its islands, and all the animals and plants it is home to are the future of the people whose origins are lost in the mist of history. This is the message that a renowned Maasai proverb has perpetuated. The earth is not a gift from your parents, but a loan from your children. Africa, the continent of extreme poverty, but unmatched happiness, is the example of this century's problems and conservation. A century of global threats, but also a century of hope. Because if there is something that all the world's conservation bodies agree upon, it is that we can all do something to achieve the urgent task of saving the environment. And what's more, we all should do something. The Senegalese writer Baba Dioum wrote, "In the end, we conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand. We will understand only what we are taught. No one could have better defined conservation in this new and transcendent 21st century.